Hiya, Tom. Good morning.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good. I'm enjoying the slightly lower temperature world we now live in. There's just the high 20s.
Yeah, I'm sort of still sweating slightly, but not absolutely dripping the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a bit much. It feels like everything's calmed down a bit. I don't know if that's because of post-football.
Yeah, well,
That's
maybe
all,
now there's no football.
all the madness is done. We're over that. It was a bit sad,
And
really.
also, we're not just trying to cope with heat now, right? We're in a world where even though it's still like 28 degrees, it feels positively cool compared to the last 3 weeks.
Exactly, exactly. It's all relative, isn't it? It's all relative.
We had our first cloudy day on Tuesday when I went off to Cambridge for punt and dine.
Oh, yes. How was that?
It was a lovely day. Because of the weather, I chose no jacket, shorts, short sleeve shirt, and then I left the house and it was cloudy. And I was like, I was cold, like cold on the train, cold all the way to Cambridge. But the sun came out and it was cool. It was a great day. Have you spent much time in Cambridge?
Yeah, well, I grew up not too far from there, so Cambridge was
True.
one of the bigger towns that we would go to if we weren't in Bury. So, yeah, I know it reasonably well, but I mean, haven't been back for years actually. And at one point, ran a couple of bars and restaurants there. So, yeah, know it reasonably well from a personal and sort of trade perspective. I mean, lovely city, beautiful place. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know it well, and I didn't spend much time in the city centre, but much more beautiful and much nicer to get into and out of than, like Oxford. I've always found a bit much, hard to get into, super busy.
Yeah, they are both quite similar. Obviously, Oxford and Cambridge, Oxbridge have that connection of the two historic universities, but they are quite similar in the sort of size and also the challenges of trading. They're these sort of quite closed loops in terms of
Mhm.
the employment market there. It's quite difficult to hire. But they're good places. There's obviously money. They're more diverse than people think.
Did you say it's more difficult to hire because I guess they're sort of like little ecosystems of their own, and a lot of the students don't work?
Yeah,
Is that what
potentially.
happens?
So you get this transient workforce that don't necessarily want to, work through in sort of long-term capacities, but then you get a small pool of people who kind of move around. So you get this
Mhm.
quite static employment pool. There's not tons of people coming in long term. On the one side, lots of students and stuff that you can hire to fill some part-time roles or faster moving roles, but static senior hires.
Mhm.
You get people who got almost great CVs, have worked in loads of places, but they've worked in like 10 of the places around the city. So,
Yeah,
and everyone just sort of moves around. You're just like shuffling management around. A new
yeah,
opening comes in, someone maybe they're slightly disgruntled, been running somewhere for a year and a half. They're like, right, I'll go and do the new opening. There's not a lot of movement in that employment market. So, or
yeah,
certainly in the past, we found it quite challenging to get really
yeah. I guess if
motivated.
you live in that part of the world, there's only so far you can commute. There's only so far you can
Yeah,
go for work, and there's only that town.
yeah. Not to say you can't find great people there. It's just maybe there are a lot of people who are kind of on that conveyor belt, that local conveyor belt, and so you have to sort of work a little bit harder. But yeah, that was in the past. Maybe it's changed now. Maybe there's a bit more dynamism in that employment market. So, but anyway,
Nice.
how was the punting?
Punting, first time I've punted. It was a lovely little experience. I didn't actually have to punt. We had a guide who did the heavy lifting. I drank a pint of Pimm's and relaxed in the sun. The sun did come out. It was a lovely day. Like there was 180 people from all across the industry. It was really nice to be at an event I wasn't running myself, which is not something I often do.
Yeah, you can just
So that
chill
was
out.
lovely. But also just hanging out with that many people from the industry without a specific agenda. That's the sort of networking I like.
Yeah.
But it was great. Like it was all for Only A Pavement Away, and Greg did a bit of a talk about charity, and I guess like I'm just left feeling a bit surprised that they still struggle to find businesses that will take people from their programs. And I mean, it's easy for me to say that.
I'm assuming that people who are listening to a hospitality specific podcast will have heard of Only Pavement Away, but if they haven't, do you want to give a bit of a
Yeah, I mean, I'm not Greg, so I might not do it justice. But Only A Pavement Away works with people from, I mean, mainly like disadvantaged backgrounds. So prison leavers, homeless, and people with other sort of learning difficulties or neurodivergent, all sorts of things that make it difficult for people to get into work. I think primarily homeless and
ex-offenders, isn't
prison
it?
leavers,
Yeah.
ex-offenders. I think a bit like Switchback. Switchback is solely prison leavers. We used to work with Switchback at Baba Boom, and we had a couple of people come through the kitchen on that program, and you know, it is challenging at times. And again, we were a super small business who wanted to try and do something like that. And I guess I'm really surprised. Greg was saying they've got 300 people currently on their books who they could put into work, fairly immediately, and then enable them to go and find 300 more. The moment there's sort of problem is they've got a backlog. There's 900 multi-site businesses on the Propel database. How are there not more places that could take a person here, a person there? It feels like that's something that, the cultural side of running a hospitality business has moved on. Like, I think 10 years ago, I could have imagined there being a bit of fear and a bit of reticence to, do something that was going to be harder work. But yeah, I'm just surprised that more people won't take a risk.
I think the industry has been moaning about, difficulty hiring chefs for a long time, particularly chefs, particularly in the kitchen. And that's an area that Only Pavement Away sort of particularly focus on, because as part of their program, gain skills in potentially in institutions where they are, in prisons and stuff, and then they can come out and then utilise those skills, and quite often to a really high standard. We did a bit of work with them years ago. I was in Bermondsey, and my business partner Ben was part of a bit of a trial, and we had nothing but positive kind of feelings about it. And yes, there's a bit of work up front, bit of changing mentalities, and getting people, in the right mindset to sort of deal with maybe a little bit more monitoring and management. But in
and
my
support
experience
and feedback.
just thinking about things slightly differently rather than sort of lobbing people in and let them get on with it, being a bit more cognizant of people's environment and how to support them. But in our experience, it was nothing but positive. And Only Pavement Away, if I'm going back a bit, but they were incredibly well set up, like a really well organized, focused charity, and behind the scenes, they know what they're doing, and I think they do a lot of work to set it up in a way that it should be a really brilliant resource for hospitality. And let's face it, people that you hire are off the street, pardon the expression, or from CV, from Indeed, like, you don't know these guys' background anyway. So
I think you've literally hit the nail on the head. He said that exact thing. The way he approached it was, if you work with one of our people, I guarantee you will know much more about their background, what they're good at, what they struggle with, what they need for support, how to make them excellent, than you will ever get from a CV, meeting someone in an interview situation for, 20 minutes.
As a real world example, recently we had to part ways with someone because a few months in, they started behaving completely irrationally and unacceptably, so in our business, and all the things that I think people might fear from a chef.
It's already happening.
Yeah, we did it. And so, what you got to lose? Like, you probably get someone who's got many more skills, is focused.
But interestingly, the other
work.
blocker that he said he's finding now is whether it's because of sort of like the prevalence of like ATSs and sort of quite fixed recruitment processes. They're finding that you've got a KP going for like a KP role in a big team. It's not like they're the only KP, and they're having to do 3 interviews. Imagine having 3 stages, and Greg's there going basically, look, they need a scourer and they need an hour tutorial, and they'll show up and they'll do it. And he's sort of right. What are you interviewing a KP about for more than a chat about what the job's going to be like and what, if any, experience they've got? I think it is interesting that the 2 biggest problems I think we've got is, one, sort of the process doesn't really fit the people.
Yeah.
But also, I think people are still nervous about giving people a chance, which I just think is madness.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough, but at the same time, it's everyone's choice, and but they do great work. Greg's amazing, relentless ambassador.
We'll try and get him on the podcast.
Yeah, let's try and get him on. But you had a good time. A few glasses.
I had a lovely time.
Doesn't sound too bad.
And yeah, like, bit of a hangover on Wednesday. Struggled, if I'm honest, with even staying up through the football because it was a long day on the Tuesday.
Hang on a minute.
But look,
we had a long day on Friday as well.
I've had a couple of long days.
It's been an easy week for Utra.
Oh yeah, it's not been my most laptop focused week. I'll say that. I did watch it's only the second football match I've watched, but I did watch it, and obviously they lost. That was exactly what I said would happen if I watched another game. But yeah, how did it work out, Tom? Well, I guess you were around for a football match for once, but also you were doing no bookings, and we said we'd come back and talk about the no booking atmosphere.
Yeah, so I also had like kind of week off the laptop really. So I've got a million people I need to get back to and do a load of work, but for different reasons. I was sort of in the business, in the detail, hands on. So yeah, it was great. Wednesday was great. The build up to it. Ben and I spent a bit of time grappling with a booking system, trying to turn off the World Cup reservations and then deal with people who were then circumnavigating that process, and
Mm.
emailing, phoning, trying to book on site or trying to book for dinner because we didn't want to turn down anyone who wanted to dine, but had to make it extremely clear about timings and that then have a big football game. So yeah, it was just a bit of a tightrope to walk. I mean, in the end, no bookings made it much easier on the ops side in the businesses because the teams don't have to worry about holding reservations and holding tables and all that. It's just a case
Mhm.
of get in early and fill your boots. And yeah, that worked on the whole. It worked really well. It was much easier for us. It just meant we could focus on the shift, set everyone up, have
Mm.
everyone in serving drinks, taking money, and prepping and staying on top. I mean, the Carlton Tavern is not designed for that high volume sort of shifts. It's not set up really. It's like lots of small rooms. So I worked all night and it was very hot. It was just like an absolute battle on glassware. We were pulling out every old glass
Yeah.
from the cellar and getting it through the system.
Were you busier earlier than you had been for other games?
Oh yeah. So it was a marked difference in terms of people getting in, getting in early. I mean, it still wasn't huge. It wasn't like a 2 hour build up, but from about an hour and a half
Interesting.
before it was steady. But that's quite good. I mean, in terms of really maximising, taking money over the bar. So we did a very similar amount of money to the Sunday and the Wednesday, which was a big win. In fact, we did a little bit more the previous Sunday, but then we had a bit of Sunday trade. We had a much better trade all day, right?
Yeah, of
Whereas
course.
Wednesday
Like
was
I guess that's a Wednesday wouldn't normally be a Sunday's level of trade, right?
no, no. So I think that worked well for us. I was pretty pleased with the numbers. We were pretty quiet until that, yeah, couple of hours before, and then it started to ramp up nicely. And then, yeah, we were just jam packed, and it was, very difficult navigating through the pub, getting glasses, getting food off tables. But it worked, and everyone was happier, I think, because it was a much clearer message to the guest. So in the couple of days and all day, Ben and I were dealing with guests who were a bit peeved off because they'd booked and then had an immediate cancellation from the system, or we'd manually cancelled and then emailed everyone to explain it's walk-ins only, it's standing room, get down early. And some people were like, oh yeah, we get it. Other people were annoyed because they wanted the book. And I understand that. And I think we'd sort of made that choice. So we just have to live with that. But yeah, operationally, it worked much better for us. It was much simpler for our team. And I think we maximized it. What was really marked for me when I was on the bar, struggling to remember how to use the till and all of that stuff, was just you always pick up these small little, challenges when you're operating at peak. You realize, okay, we could set up better for that. But then I remember this is maybe a handful of times a year we operate in that
Yeah.
intensity. I didn't really see any of the game. By all accounts, Tuchel's a double agent. Get rid of him. Nah.
I mean, I'm not the right person to be talking about
Yeah,
football on a podcast. Like, there's other people that are far more qualified than I.
there's no football banter there. Yeah, so I was a bit peeved off, obviously, because it would have been great to finish off this week with a
Yeah.
huge Sunday. However, on reflection, I always feel quite sort of relaxed when these huge pieces are done, like at Christmas, or if it's the World Cup or anything like that around in England run in the Euros or World Cup. They're quite stressful and they do mess up your normal trading patterns. So
Yeah.
you are taking loads of money in a very short space of time and it's quite intensive. And if you get it wrong, you can annoy loads of people. The risks are just higher. I mean, it's great fun. We had a wicked shift.
Yeah.
Team were brilliant.
You're
And
right. Like Christmas is the bigger example, right? Christmas lunches and bookings and all that stuff. Like you mess up that table of 20 and, you've caused yourself a load of headache, load of bad vibes, and probably a fair chunk of refunds.
yeah, and you're building it up for ages. There's so much work goes behind it. And to Christmas, I'm always just I'm done with it. I just want it to be
Yeah.
over. I want to get into January and we can start
Well,
focusing on what we're going to do
hoping you're starting your Christmas push fairly soon, aren't you?
well, that's the depressing thing, mate, is that yeah, we're already talking about menus and and what we
Yeah, good.
flipping websites and all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah. Well, you can also just vibe code a new Christmas version, like easy.
yeah, that is good. Yeah. I'm looking forward to the ease of that. But yeah, football. I think Sunday will actually be okay. We've got quite a lot of European guests. I think people will want to watch that game. Spain Argentina will be a good game. And yeah, so hopefully Sunday trade will sort of return to normal a little bit. We can calm down and just get on with it. And then I think that had the Monday then been a bank holiday, it would have been a bit weird. I'm not sure if it would have been amazing.
No, it was the Friday, wasn't it? It was the 24th they were touting.
Right. Okay. So yeah,
But
fine.
but I mean, I
That would
still
have been even
think
weirder. Yeah.
it would have been really weird because kids are already on holiday. So a load of people are probably either already on holiday or are doing something that involves their kids because it's school holidays. And it was going to be the parade day. So I guess
Oh
there'll be
yes.
whatever,
Yeah.
millions of people in London. I don't know. I think it's a good idea. It's not happening. But so like looking ahead to the next, I don't know, Euros, will you be walking only then?
I think we'll play it as we did this time. Oh, we'll be much clearer on a certain proportion that you can book, and then maybe have one room that's held for walk-ins
Maybe a
only.
better booking system by that point as well, then, if this one was a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, it's partly our own proficiency in managing, to be honest. So we have a really great new GM starting in a couple of weeks. So who knows? Who knows what they're doing? So hopefully he'll be able to sort it all out
Okay,
for
good.
us.
Very nice.
Now it's just back to focusing on the core things that we're doing, and the things out the back end of summer. Just still trying to maximize summer and outside trading and all that good stuff. So yeah.
And what about news-wise? There's been a couple of casual dining topics recently, hasn't there, that I thought were quite interesting?
Yeah. I think there's been a bit of chat about the Stonegate purchase, people circling those pubs, but I mean, nothing actually happening yet. So maybe we'll come back to that.
Well, there's been quite a lot of news around that whole casual dining market. We're going to record a deeper conversation around Oaxaca as well, aren't we? Like Oaxaca's sale next week, because I think that's interesting. But Turtle Bay's been in the news, I don't know, for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I guess it just comes back to another conversation about casual dining. A lot of these brands have been around for quite a long time. How do you revive them? Like, I think it's a really fascinating thing. We were walking down the high street last Friday talking about Prezzo, and actually Prezzo released some results as well, like last week, which were really, really positive. They're in the middle of their estate renovation, which seems to be delivering results, which is great. And they've gone through quite a punchy rebrand and all that sort of stuff. And I guess it's interesting because Turtle Bay going through similar struggles as probably where Prezzo was, but it doesn't feel like we're hearing as much about the plan to sort it out.
I don't know too much about Turtle Bay because I think they got to like 50 sites, right? So they were pretty big.
Yeah, at
Lots of them
least.
out of London. I mean, mostly out of London. I'm not really aware of any central. Maybe did they have one in Notting Hill?
Yeah, I mean, there was a few in London. Back in the day, they were like Ealing, Dalston. It wasn't ever central London brand, but it's been pretty prevalent. I think at some point it was, yeah, high 50s number of sites. It was a big group.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It's the Las Iguanas guy who set it up, right? So it's the guy who founded Las Iguanas.
Yeah, I think he was either an investor or a co-founder of Las Iguanas. He wasn't the main guy who was Eran Ali, who was the main Las Iguanas dude, who's a lovely chap. But yeah, Turtle Bay. I mean, Turtle Bay's been around for
Yeah, but it was
what
a
would you guess
concept, right? It was
now?
a pure concept. So it wasn't like someone had a little Caribbean restaurant. They were doing it, heart and soul in it, and then they expanded out. They designed a Caribbean concept. And
Yeah, and I think it was at that point of time where we all sort of realized that there was appetite in the market for things that were wider than pizza and burgers and chicken. We'll
yeah.
talk about that next time because we want to get into the
Where,
prevalence of
where
pizza,
else
burgers,
is
and
there in
chicken.
the world? There's some tasty food.
But basically, I started a Middle Eastern premium fast casual
Yeah.
restaurant business for the exact same reason as Turtle Bay, as Las Iguanas, as Oaxaca. It was a gap in a market when the public enjoyed, I don't know what, experiencing or being able to experience these different cuisines in a modern way and probably accessible. Like it was accessible, right?
Living in central London, maybe there's a bit more, and there's the boom of street food markets have probably had access to a lot more Caribbean food, but I think that's still relatively niche around the UK. So there's exciting, interesting cuisine for lots of people in market towns to explore. But I do think the British market does seem to be a little bit slower moving when it comes to newer cuisines. And I think Oaxaca is an example, like Mexican stuff, Chipotle, and lots of American brands that are foods that are huge in the States, particularly sort of Mexican style burritos or tacos or
Mm.
whatever. They don't translate in a mass market way in the UK. It's been much harder for those things. So any burger brands and pizza brands have come over and they've boomed because I think the UK market sort of gets that. It's established, it's always had that. Anything that's a little bit harder, it takes a bit longer to establish.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, that's just what I've seen. But always look at Chipotle and think there's huge monster business in the States. How have they not cracked the UK market in the way that Five Guys did with burgers, for example?
Yeah.
Came in and just accelerated and went everywhere. And maybe Turtle Bay has been a bit of a victim of that. kind of, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's probably always been a bit of a hard thing. It's a niche cuisine. You know, you need to be really in the right location. You probably need to accept it's not even, Indian cuisine, which even the successful Indian group, your Dishoom's and stuff, like they are upper market and they are high footfall locations.
Yeah, but
You know,
they're still they're massive format, and I know they've got the permit room, they've got smaller formats now, but
yeah.
they were
But there's only
originally
like 10,
huge. Yeah, there's 10 of them. They're relatively small group for
you
that,
know.
and but there's not really been an Indian chain that's dominated around the UK, has there? I mean, I can think of
No,
maybe Masala Zone. There's a bunch of them, but not really. It's all
yeah, but not
independents.
really anymore.
No,
Not
all
really anymore, I don't
independents.
think.
No, doing it really well, and I guess that's to be the same for Caribbean food, right? So Turtle Bay,
Yeah,
yeah,
but
bit of an
again, like
outlier,
even if you assume, right, that you can sort of, I think, brute force these things these days, right? Like with enough cash, you can open enough sites in enough of the right places, give a accessible enough offer that is, interesting, different, well priced, that people will come, right? That they've built a good business, turned over best part of 100 million 2 years ago. I guess the interesting part to note is I think they lost 10% to last year. In the recent year, they've lost another 20% on that. So, for whatever reasons, if people are going out less, they're more price sensitive. They are probably going back to more comfortably known, more reliable, more, I don't know,
Well,
yeah, more familiar.
yeah, I mean, on paper, so I think some of the headline numbers were last year they did, well, the most recent numbers were they had about 70 odd million turnover and a couple of hundred grand profit, a couple of hundred grand
Yeah,
EBITDA. So, I mean, there's like no margin basically. It's almost, 0.3 margin,
0.3% margin. If the numbers that were talked about yesterday are the actual numbers, which I guess they're not fully released for whatever reason,
but ballpark.
yeah, 0.3% EBITDA,
And
which,
they quoted something like a third of the estates in is loss making. So like absolute like madness. But I mean, if you look at the real like step back completely out the detail, you go. It's started by people that are obviously really good, know what they're doing, had massive success with a Latino brand. It got to like 4 or 5. Equity guys came in, boom, right, just go mad, go everywhere. I just picked up loads of sites that were available, put it in retail parks, put it next to all these other people, and you get to what, 40, 50, and now it's turning over a massive amount of money at the top, and it's just there's nothing coming out the bottom. And then Equity exited what, 2 years ago?
suspect they did not make a load of money, personally.
Yeah, so just get out of there. Bought back by the original owners, and now they're just going to be in a cycle of decline until they trim out their estate, until they maybe get back to 10, 15.
Yeah,
And it's just really interesting after talking to John and talking about, slow,
yeah,
determined, focused growth. I wonder if wherever it will get to, maybe they'll get back to 10 sites, 15 sites that are profitable and worth it. And they'll make more profit out of that than having this huge tail and this massive, central costs
yeah,
and all that. Whether they could have got there with a bit of focused money and investment, smaller, slower, in the same amount of time than the boom and bust and then, repackaged cycle.
yeah, exactly. I think you just said, like, if they're turning over 70 million with about 50 sites, you're pretty much sub 30K a week, which is your average site turnover, which, I imagine you're doing 10 to 20% delivery. So there's very little margin on all of those sales. It's a hard place to be, I think, in casual dining at those sort of volumes, in the sort of high profile sites they've got, like that is hard. I think you're probably right. This is probably not the only round of challenge ahead.
I was talking to an ops manager the other day, shall remain anonymous, but in a sort of similar branded, casual dining kind of concept, and had a slightly depressing conversation about their P&L reviews and like how they're being conducted and the sort of questions that they're getting asked, and everyone's just getting squeezed, right? The accountability ball's rolling downhill extremely fast right now, and everyone's just saying, "Right, go get me sales. What's going on?"
But that's
And
But that's what's almost most frustrating. Why, as a business owner or a business leader, like all we do is we expect the people on the ground to fix everything, take more sales, cut more labor, control your margin more. No one often looks the other way.
well, and the frustrating thing with it, with the conversation I had with this friend, is that he just went and got the shit kicked out of him in a P&L review, and and that's rubbish. I don't know all the detail. Maybe deserved some of it, but pretty new into a business, so it's not going to have too much impact. And we all know, really, as experienced operators, as senior operators, been around for several big businesses. We know that everyone knows that senior person grilling them. They all know what the problems are. They should do. there's structural
Mhm.
issues. So if you're in Turtle Bay, and I'm not saying that this is how Turtle Bay are doing it, but I think the three things in the article I read about them that they said are the headwinds are rising operational costs. Well, that's always been there. It's been there forever, right? You should know that's going to be the case. Reduced consumer spending, again, since the credit crunch, it's been, a difficult consumer environment. And then changing footfall patterns, which is a pretty
Yeah.
vague catch-all term for people aren't coming to our restaurants anymore, going somewhere else.
Look, I don't know the real answers because I'm not inside the Turtle Bay, P&L. But my instinct would be it's probably rents and leases and service charges and things like that they can't change. That's a fixed cost once you sign the lease. Probably the service model for sales level isn't working. Labour's probably too high. And it's not something that you can change. If you're the general manager of a store, you can only change that within very, very narrow guardrails.
I guess the conversation I had was a bit depressing because it just reminded me of the fact that there are so many people in those sort of roles, in operations roles, that should be focusing on, positive stuff, supporting the operators on the ground, coaching, training, looking at ways of being dynamic in your business. Really, they're spending their time just like doing reports and trying to explain to people who already know the answer, who want to shift accountability to the next tier of hierarchy about why sales aren't coming
Yeah, I
in.
mean,
You already know, right? Like in a branded restaurant chain, sales are driven by service for sure, but that's quite a long-term sales driving, cycle. But they are kind of driven by brand and marketing and the execution of the offer, of course. But the GM on the ground, they're very, very little.
other than I think there's a pass fail, right? Of in all of the sites that you're responsible for, your entire focus really is get the right X amount of people into your sites, at all level and roles. That is actually the important thing, because ultimately, as long as they're doing the right things to a reasonable level of ability, the way that the brand and operation should be executed, if you do all those things, that is about as much as those people can do above and beyond what are the P&L mechanics that we can't control, like rent, and what is the brand perception and awareness and offer, pricing, deals, public sentiment, all that stuff. It isn't that controllable at a site level.
And I thought that maybe the industry moved on a lot from the good old days, or the bad old days, of just like whacking ops guys over the head, being like, go and get me sales, make more money, say, cut labour, say, make more money. And that sort of, unthinking, just rolling it downhill and just being really aggressive and not having a sensible conversation about what can we do and how are you actually going to go and execute that and implement it.
I guess the problem is a lot of those things they're not quite introspective, but they're sort of like, you've got to look at the uncomfortable stuff because it's probably the stuff that's slower to change, harder to change, more structural, right? Because you're we actually have to face into the fact that 30% of our sites don't make money. Unless we have got obvious ways to change that, we should probably not have them.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to a kind of a lack of honest conversations in senior leadership rooms where they say, right, we're quite heavy, we're top heavy, we're carrying weight. If this carries on, what's the timeline around having to trim this? What's the timeline around having to do some more structural, serious things? And then everyone panics and starts looking after the number one and gets extremely directive. And that does happen because the strategy is the same. We worked once, why isn't it working now? Well, for all the reasons that you've said, or the market's challenging, football changes, blah, blah, blah. I have to stress, I'm not talking about Turtle Bay. I feel like we've sort of...
No, just more generally, actually.
But in general. So anyway, it made me think and reflect upon the fact that some businesses they're big tankers and it's tough. And actually, being a small, nimble business can sometimes be helpful. And it reminded me this week I've been doing quite a lot of work on our own P&Ls in the background. We're going through a process of just trying to trim where possible. And actually, I want to be really positive about some small things that they've actually been wins. It feels like this relentless kind of headwinds, which is true. But, recently we've had a little bit of help with our energy procurement from the wonderful Diego at Rye Utilities. So someone that I met through Ops Club. We had a lovely dinner. Didn't really talk about hospitality much, talked about all sorts of other things, and then connected. And it's just a super smart business, AI-powered platform that is dedicated to providing, better rates for hospitality energy. And Diego's super helpful. really slick, signed up, and we've now got some much better rates. Going to save us thousands of pounds across 2 sites
Amazing.
over the next 12
Yeah.
months, and then had a massive win on gas as well. So at the moment, you can get some really good deals on gas. I think it's so volatile. The energy market's really volatile, but right now we just signed up for some 3-year contracts that are stable, decent price, and actually we're going to save us a load of money. So that feels like there's the moment in time that if you're really nimble and you keep looking and keep working, I would recommend anyone with a couple of sites, few sites, to get into Rye.
I think what I like, and I met Diego a little while ago as well. I think often, the idea of like an energy broker is not a new thing, right? Brokers are good. But again, I think there's a real risk that with a human broker, people are sort of fallible. They could be self-interested. They can have preferential suppliers they want to use because of certain things that they might receive in return. And actually, what I've loved about getting to know, the Rye platform and the fact that it is well, I guess ultimately probably wider ranging, looking at market opportunities and also done via technology, is it removes a load of that stuff. And are you going to look into the monitoring side as well? I guess what I loved when I saw it was that I don't need to buy expensive hardware to monitor my electricity now. Rye can do it all from your meter.
So I worked for a large hospitality company fairly recently, and they were spending massive amount of money on a third party monitoring the usage to tell them when the usage spikes and what's going on. And Rye just does it with smart technology, and
Yeah, literally, I don't know how, but it plugs into your meter. Are you doing that then? Are you going to look at that then as well?
So I updated our opening times the other day and took a look at some monitoring. Went in and had a question for the chefs, and there's about turning kit on, and it's always the same stuff, right? We were doing this 20 years ago.
Yeah. But also
But
you can
you
go
have
and
to
pay a
have
lot of money for this hardware.
yeah
At a recent like last role I was working, like we'd spent quite a lot of money implementing hardware and monitoring software, and
yeah
you know I think doing it sans hardware saves a lot of money. Rye is a great business to look at, and there's a couple of free tools as part of what they do before you get into anything that might have a small cost, and I really mean a small cost. We've got a new tools section as part of the Ops Club website where we're going to start adding, I guess, tools like this. And actually, it's interesting, Tom, that you brought this up before I brought up about this, because I'm going to be adding the Rye monitoring and procurement tool onto there shortly. But yeah, I think there's a couple of these that now exist where people are doing some of this sort of like brokering stuff, but doing it with technology, and they can just do it in a much more affordable and sort of easier. Because I bet, Tom, you don't have time to be like talking to brokers and
so crucially, these are people who are interested in and understand operations and hospitality, and they want to help rather than just pure brokers. So well, I've had to, be quite rude to. There's one specific company. There's a call center, based overseas, and they just call every day, twice a day, and they say they're from somewhere that they're not. They just hound my staff, and they pretend that they are our energy providers. They're not, and all sorts of dirty tactics. The phone is constantly ringing. My phone, I don't know, my number's obviously got into a database somewhere, and I'm just getting
yeah.
constantly hounded by brokers, and it's boring and it's rubbish and it wastes time and it's frustrating. And then when you actually work with someone who genuinely wants to help, is solving a problem, has got some smart tech. I've said it about Review and about Percy and Rye in a similar category. Like when you have someone who's focused and dedicated on solving a particular problem, they really understand the depth of the problem in the ops world, how it relates to operations, how to do it, how to solve the problem seriously in real life, not sort of theoretically. It feels like seamless. And you think, well, why isn't everyone doing this? So yeah, couldn't recommend that enough. Also, Diego, absolute pleasure to chat to and work with.
Have you checked your supplier pricing with Percy yet?
No, it's one of the things I was supposed to do this week, and I need to follow
Oh,
up on.
fine. Yeah, you definitely should, because we've got a Percy tool on the website as well where you can enter, I can't remember how many, but a couple of your key lines.
Yeah.
And then they can predict from that likely supplier savings across the group
Yeah.
of products. We've got a couple of new tools on the website if anyone wants to check it out, including something that I've not used yet, but does look very exciting, which is a rates relief checker from the guys at Paddle. I think you might have met Christian, Tom, at the first founders lunch we did.
Yes, I did. Yeah, great.
But yeah, they've built a little tool where you can upload your rates bill, check if you're overpaying, and check for like errors and any other things that they, or like tactics that they know that might mean that you're not paying the right amount of money. So yeah, couple of tools on there already, a couple of other interesting things. I've uploaded a hospitality events calendar that exists for the industry. And I also uploaded, I don't know if you saw, Tom, but Sally Abbey created this women-led hospitality map.
Nice.
So I've uploaded
Yeah.
that as well, just because trying to collect interesting hospitality tools together. So if anyone wants to check it out, it's ops-club.com/tools. We'll link to it somewhere in the show notes. But yeah, we are seeing each other next week, Tom, for an in-person record. We're going to record a couple of episodes on Tuesday. Are you up to anything interesting in the days ahead?
Well, I'm heading off back to Suffolk for a little bit of birthday celebrations. You might notice I've got my party shirt on, ready to go. I'm turning 40. I was chatting to a friend of mine a couple of days ago who was like, all right, I thought you were like 48, mate. Cheers, pal.
Maybe it's just like, a wise business owner.
Yeah. It's the grey hairs, mate. It's tough paper round. No, so yeah, it's my birthday, and I'll never do anything, but it feels like maybe this is one to mark. So I'm heading back home. We got a nice dinner and barbecue and stuff this weekend with my family, which should be good fun. Always gets a little bit boozy, and then I'm back next week, and then heading away to a little vineyard on the south coast, which will be very nice, and then a bit of a barbecue at the pub on the following weekend. So I've put like 10 years worth of birthdays into one, and then I'm not going to do another birthday until 50.
2 hours with me recording podcast episodes as well.
Exactly, yeah. And then in between that, I need to do a little bit of work, Percy, and various other follow-ups that I need to do.
Nice. Very good. Well, I look forward to seeing you next week, Tom. It's been a pleasure. Have a great weekend.
And you. See you later, mate.